Pros in the know start with Lowe's, because at Lowe's, pros can get the latest power tools from trusted brands. Right now, you can buy the new Bosch Core 18-volt 2-tool combo kit for $229 and get one of 3 select cordless Bear tools free, worth up to $199. Plus, you can save time by ordering online and picking up in-store. Stop by the Pro Desk or visit lowesforpros.com for details. So, Pro, now that you know, start with Lowe's. Offer valid through 1/30/2019 while supplies last. U.S. only.
Get ready for all the craziness of small business. It's exactly that craziness that makes it exciting and totally unbelievable. Small Business Radio is now on the air with your host, Barry Moltz.
Well, thanks for joining this week's radio show. Remember, this is your final word in small business. For those keeping track, this is now show number, 510. This episode is provided by Nextiva, the all-in-one communication platform. It's also provided by Square Payroll, the easy way to pay your team. Go to www.square.com/go/SBR. It's also sponsored by LinkedIn, the place to advertise, to generate leads and build relationships with your audience. For a free $100 ad credit, go to www.linkedin.com/SBR. Well, there are two things that couples historically fight about. The first one is sex, and the second one is money. While the first one doesn't really fit the general theme of this show, we're going to talk about the second one, which of course is money. How couples spend their money has resulted in many arguments. So, how should a married couple handle the money that flows through their lives? My first guest is Kathy Longo. She's the author of Flourish Financially, Values, Transitions, and Big Conversations, and is the president and founder of Flourish Wealth Management. She has over 25 years of experience as wealth management and a financial planner. She was named one of the top 50 women in wealth management by Wealth Manager magazine. She's also been quoted in the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, and Money magazine. Kathy, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Well, the first question I have to ask you is, I try to ask everyone who's ever been in the Wall Street Journal, is, have you had a drawing of yourself yet?
Yeah, I have in different magazines, but not in the Wall Street Journal.
That's my goal, to have an electric pencil sharpener and a drawing in the Wall Street Journal. So we're talking about couples. Couples do fight about money all the time. Why is that, in your opinion?
You know, I really think it's because money can be a hard conversation to talk about. When you have two individuals, they both come with different backgrounds and their own history with money and their own interpretation of how money should be used.
Yeah, I think partially it's because everybody, as you say, has a different view of money, and I think that's influenced with how they grew up. So, for example, when I grew up, we didn't have a lot of money. My parents constantly fought about money, and so I watched them fight. So obviously that impacted how I deal with money with my wife.
Oh, it's so true. I mean, there's so many emotions, and that lesson that you see, everybody has an early money story, and that's their first interpretation on what money means.
And I think also that we value different things in our lives. A lot of folks want to spend money on different things. So, for example, my wife wants to spend money on clothes or furniture or something like that. And I want to spend money on traveling or cycling. And sometimes there isn't a lot of overlap.
Yeah, and it's, you know, it's really kind of comes down to that different interpretation of wants versus needs and really understanding where the other person's coming from.
I think what's really amazing, and you talk about this in the book, is a lot of couples, before they get married, Kathy, they talk about a lot of things, right? They talk about, where do you want to live? Do you want to have children? Those kinds of things. But they really don't talk about where their partner financially stands or what they value when it comes to money. Why is that?
I think it's because we don't have that training. We're usually not provided any financial education in our school systems. Our parents aren't talking about money. Our friends aren't talking about money. So we're really not clear on what are the questions we should be asking and what information do we need to understand that other person's financial viewpoints.
So in your career, you're talking about money all the time because that's what you do. You're a money manager. Why don't we, in our regular lives, talk about money? Is it something that's secret, private, embarrassing? What is it?
I think it can be all of the above. It's so rooted in different emotions for individuals. And so that's where the challenge comes, is how do you separate the emotions around money to have a real conversation that's accepting and that both parties feel heard.
So what conversations should people talk about? Let's say there's some listeners who haven't yet gotten married or they're engaged. What conversations should they be having before they get married?
I think it starts with understanding each other's money history. So questions about what was your earliest money memory, or how did your family handle money growing up, or what are the best financial decisions that you've made, and what does financial freedom look like for you in the future? So having these conversations about their history and their goals for the future can really get the conversation started and be eye-opening in terms of how they approach and think about money.
So as a money manager, do you ever have that conversation jointly with people that are supposed to get married, and you act kind of like as a money therapist? I've been quoted as she was like a money therapist, and I've had many clients come in saying, this was like a therapy session, and, it was really eye-opening. And that's that benefit of with a financial planner who is willing to facilitate some of those conversations, making sure that both parties are heard and creating that safe environment where, they can really kind of maybe neutralize the emotions and get people starting to talk about it. Yeah, so that's one of the fun parts about my job. So the question that I really wanted to ask you, and why I was so excited to interview you for the radio show, was, should married couples have a joint checking account or not? Because I always survey my friends about this, and there seems to be a lot of accommodation solutions that have come up with people trying to cope with this.
It's true, and it's a question that I often get asked. And I really think that either approach can work, but it's really more important to have a system for sharing expenses, and even more important for saving and planning for the future. And then above all, honesty, because what I see sometimes when there's these separate accounts, it could be a bank account or even a credit card account, when it's a secret account, that's usually where the trouble is starting to happen, and where you start to see where lies might be happening.
Well, I'll tell you what my wife Sarah and I do, and in 10 years of being on the radio, I've never disclosed this, Kathy. I'm going to disclose it to you right now. So we've been married almost 30 years, and we do have separate checking accounts, although the names are on both the accounts. We really do have separate checking accounts. And the way that we've handled money for the last 28 plus years is that I pay for everything, and then I give her X number of dollars per month. Plus, she gets to keep everything that she earns. And the only thing that she ends up paying for the family is the food. And those kind of expectations, those lines seem to work well for us because I don't get aggravated by what she spends her money on. She doesn't get aggravated by what I spend my money on. And it seems to be a good neutral ground. And it's been able to keep the peace for the most part for 28 years.
And I think it sounds like you've come up with a great system, and you've been able to take away some of the emotions and give a little independence. And there seems to be, like I'm hearing, it's working for you. So I think that's all really great. I think that at times coming together around the bigger picture of making sure everybody understands what kind of total spending is. It doesn't have to get down to the nitty-gritty detail of, what item you bought, but, just making sure that both parties are aware of, what's the overall plan and what are we saving for and building for the future.
So are family budgets an important part of that?
Yes, and it really, so if you think about where does savings need to be, as long as you're hitting your savings goals and understanding what your spending is like now and in the future, how it will change, when kids, hopefully launch and, head off into the real world, that's really important to kind of see where are you headed towards in your financial goals.
So I want to talk about another subject that you cover in your book is the lying that goes on around money. And lying around money is not necessarily something that's new, but it does happen in a marriage. Why does it happen, and what can we do about it so perhaps we don't get to that point?
Yeah, and it's true, and you said this in the beginning, but money can be one of those big reasons for divorce. And there's a study out by National Endowment for Financial Education saying 31% of Americans who have combined finances say they've lied to their spouse about money. So it's definitely happening. I think that statistic might even be a little bit low if we think about degrees of lying. And so that's where couples really need to come together on this conversation and have a more healthy approach to the money conversation.
And so why do people do this lying?
Because I think it goes back to the fear where they may feel some guilt or they want to avoid that argument. So not everyone has as healthy of approach on their spending systems. And so I see people argue over when they see that, their spouse spent this on technology and they don't have good rules for their spending. So therefore, they see these trigger points which start to create arguments. So a lot of times they're avoiding the conversation and the argument.
I love the idea of to have some agreed to rules. And I think, again, it's based on your financial wherewithal. But my wife and I, we do have agreed to rules that say we're not going to spend more than X dollars without consulting you. And I've seen other couples, the guy just comes home with a new car.
Right. No, and I really subscribe to that. Figure out what that dollar amount is. If it's $100, is it $250, is it $500? But have agreed upon number that anything above that, you need to consult the spouse and just make sure that everybody's aware of that purchase.
So what do you do when you have a couple who perhaps are of limited means and they have opposite philosophical spending habits?
Yeah, and that's really common when you think about like credit, for example. You can have somebody coming into the marriage where they're like, okay, we buy it right now on credit and we'll pay for it later. And the other person coming in saying, no, we have to save for it before we can afford to buy it. And so even no matter what somebody's means are, it's still really understanding and sorting out the difference between wants versus needs and coming up with some shared systems on how spending and that family budget plan is going to work for them. And, it doesn't matter what the resources are. It really needs to be done at all different income levels.
It's interesting because a buddy of mine was engaged to a woman, and during their engagement, he found out that she ran up a lot of credit card debt, and he broke it off.
Yeah, and I think that's one of those things you talk about, questions about what you should be asking that potential spouse, not only understanding the money history, but really kind of come clean with what are your financial resources and any debts that you have out there. And, I have a couple that actually, she had them pull their credit reports, and she was amazed at how much outstanding debt he had out there. And that did impact, and they didn't go through with their marriage either, because it just created this whole conversation of their differences in finances and how they would approach that.
Wow. So not only do we need to get AIDS tests now, we need to pull our financial scores to really see what happens. And I think that's a really good idea, Kathy, because when you go to apply for that big first purchase, whether it be a car or a house or something like that, you might be surprised about the credit score that your spouse has or doesn't have.
Yeah, and it impacts, I've seen where, you talk about all the goals that they have for the future, whether it's kids and buying a home together, and you pull that credit report and they don't have the ability to, be able to buy a house. Their score is just too low, and there's too many other debt payments that are really impacting what they can purchase today.
And let's make no mistake. I mean, the credit reports are manipulated to make sure they're as low as possible. And even one mistake 2 or 3 years ago might cost you a quarter point or a half a point on your mortgage, which could be hundreds of dollars.
Yeah, it is. And so I recommend looking at that credit score and then pulling a full credit report that lists any debt that's outstanding there to get to the inner workings of what's happening on their credit.
So what are some of the main financial documents that couples should really periodically check with each other?
Yeah, so a list of all of the banking, investment accounts, any debt, a summary of what they're spending and what their savings plan is and how they're tracking towards that. And then also planning for those what ifs, like what if one of the spouse were to pass away? Do they have, if needed, life insurance, disability insurance if they're disabled? Do they have the right wills and healthcare directives and financial power of attorneys in place? And so really getting organized around all of those financial documents will help them in case something happens to one of them.
Yeah, I think that's an important point. What I do is I don't do a great job of keeping Sarah up to date on where all the financial documents are. I just say, listen, if something happens, make sure you talk to Zane, make sure you talk to Amy, make sure you talk to Dana. They'll lead you in the right direction.
Yeah, and having, I think that's a great plan. So if there's a professional team or friends that have this knowledge, have that information gathered to make it easier. Because when you think about a death or a divorce, that's really an emotional time, and it's hard to get up to speed on all of the different financial pieces and where those are at.
And I think that's an important part, where those financial pieces are at, and also what are the passwords?
Yeah, the electronic, especially today, I really love like password apps that can put everything together. I've seen LinkedIn accounts and other social media accounts like out there forever because nobody knows how to close those, or they don't have a good understanding of what all of those online accounts are.
Well, Kathy, I appreciate you being on the show, and I appreciate you blessing the financial arrangement that I've had with Sarah for 28 years. Where can people get a copy of the book? It's called Flourish Financially, Values, Transitions, and Big Conversations.
Amazon is a great place to go, or Barnes & Noble online. And to find out more information, our website is flourishwealthmanagement.com.
Kathy, thanks so much again. Coming up next, why small towns, in my eyes, still rule for small business. This is AMA 20 WCPT. We'll be right back. I know a lot of small business owners are confused about where to advertise online and how to actually get results. You got to be diligent because you can lose a lot of money fast if you don't choose the right platform and the right audience. The question I always get is, should I advertise on a search engine like Google or a social media platform like LinkedIn, Facebook, or Twitter? For small business owners, LinkedIn is the place to drive brand awareness, generate leads, and build long-term, purposeful relationships that result in boosting their business. This is because effective search engine advertising should target audiences, not keywords. LinkedIn's network has more than 575 members, and their advertising gives you the ability to effectively target the right message to the right people while they're working. It has the marketing tools to help you target your customers with precision, down to their job title, company name, and industry. In fact, 4 out of 5 customers who are on LinkedIn are decision makers at their company, so you're building relationships with the people that really matter. This will result in higher quality leads and more website traffic. So to redeem a $100 free LinkedIn ad credit and launch your first campaign, please use this website for listeners of Small Business Radio Show. You got to go to linkedin.com/SBR. That's linkedin.com/SBR for your free $100 ad credit. Remember that terms and conditions apply. Let me know about your results.
You've already upgraded your cell phone to a smart device, which lets you use the internet to be more productive on the go. But what about your desk phone? Nextiva is a smart business phone system in the cloud. With a simple setup through an internet connection, you can soon have access to your office communications wherever you are. Stay seamlessly connected with clients and stay more mobile than ever before with just one low monthly cost. Give your business more than just a basic desk phone. Visit Nextiva.com or call 800-799-0600 to learn more today. Nextiva. Simplifying your business communications.
Are you stuck? Is this the year you finally grow your business and make more money? During Barry's many years of running his own company, he had to deal with the challenges of a business that just wasn't going anywhere. It was a painful realization. His business had flatlined, and he had no idea how to breathe more life into it. It was especially difficult for Barry, since his customers were not getting the service he was so passionate about delivering. Second, he wasn't making any money. Finally, his business was sucking the life out of him. Do any of these sound familiar? Your sales won't budge in spite of your best efforts. You have few new leads for customers coming in, and existing customers are fading away. You're burned out and completely exhausted. It's no longer fun, and your family suffers as well. If you're one of the millions of small business owners facing these problems every year, Barry has the answer. Check out barrymoltz.com/unstuck to subscribe to his 6-part video series. That's Barry Moltz, MOLTZ.com/unstuck.
Stick around to get your small business unstuck. More of Small Business Radio with Barry Moltz, now on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Well, 5 years ago, I was fortunate enough to write a book called Small Town Rules with my colleague Becky McCrae about what was going on in small towns and big ones that was changing because of a connected economy. Becky is a small town business owner. She and her husband, Joe, own a retail liquor store and cattle ranch. She shares insights from this real-world experience at her highly ranked website, Small Biz Survival, and in her award-winning book, With Me, Small Town Rules. Her practical perspectives featured in 3 books, dozens of magazines and blogs and podcasts. She makes her home in Hopeton, Oklahoma, a community of 30 people. Becky, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much, Barry. I'm excited to be here.
I always laugh when you live in a community of 30 people and you feed them through the cattle ranch and you allow them to drink through the liquor store. You got it all sewn up.
We do. Now, the liquor store, I will admit, is actually based in the nearby big town of Alva, Oklahoma, which is about 5,000 people. So
wow.
it's not just that I'm getting 30 people drunk all the time.
That's
No,
exactly.
It's a big town.
A little more. So let's talk about, you discussed that rural businesses are just not mom and pop, shops anymore. Things have really changed.
They really have. We have people using all kinds of innovative models. People are doing things in pop-ups. People are doing a business inside of another business. We're seeing buildings that are too large in small towns are being divided up, and so you'll see multiple businesses all together in one place. You see people trying all kinds of cool things. They're online. They're using technology. They're on the platforms, and so you see people on Kickstarter. And you can do that from anywhere as long as you've got access to the Internet or you've got your smartphone. You can do it.
So when we wrote the book Small Town Rules, we talked about how technology really has changed this. Now, that was 5 years ago. What has happened in the last 5 years?
Oh, my gosh. Work everywhere and every when. That was us. And I tell you what, that has really just accelerated because there's so many more of these platforms, and the platform development has changed everything. You can access a tool like Kickstarter. You can access a platform like Etsy or Shopify. You can use the Internet to reach out and sell products, to raise money, to connect with audiences, to find and share your assets like through Airbnb. These have really accelerated over the past 5 years, and I don't see it going anywhere except up over the next 5 or 10 years as well. So it's an exceptional time of opportunity for rural businesses to tap those platforms and really reach out anywhere, anywhen.
So let's talk about what really has changed before technology, because in rural businesses, your choices were really limited before this time.
Oh, my gosh, yeah. And there were 5 years ago, there were still a lot of people on dial-up that have moved ahead. Now, admittedly, if you look at the statistics, the number of people who lack what qualifies as actual broadband at this point, that primarily the majority of those people are rural people. But we have people inside of small towns, people that are living within a community of at least, say, 2,500. Those people have access to great broadband by and large. And it's really variable, so it just depends on your community. But the access to additional speeds, I'm in a town of 30 people, and I have a connection of 30 megabits. So,
wow.
There's 1 megabit for
exactly for each person. Well, it seems to me that with technology, there's so many resources that are really available. It used to be that if you had a business in a small town, you were limited to whoever lived there. So limited resources. Now you can really hire people from all over.
You can, and there's a lot of distributed businesses that are based just like that. The one person lives in a small town, and they work with people all over. I used to have a friend in Clay Center, Kansas, who ran an international business out of his basement, and he had support people in Paris and in Australia, and they're connecting to this business from Clay Center, Kansas. The other thing that I think is really interesting about that is not just the hiring, but all the things you can outsource, because we now have the ability, there are so many wonderful apps and platforms that can handle a lot of the back-end work that you used to depend. If you didn't have a good bookkeeper in town, you're doing your own books, or you're having to try to hire somebody and train them. And now you're like, oh, well, there's a dozen different applications that I can use to do that online, in the cloud, super easy.
It's interesting because I was advising a company that was in Chicago. They then moved to Idaho where the business owner wanted to ski, so they moved the business. And for the first 5 years, it was hard because he didn't have the resources in town really to run the business the way he wanted. But then when technology took over, Becky, it was so much easier now, and he's so glad he made the move. He just wished he had done it 5 years later.
Yeah, I can see that. And so, now is a really prime time for the people that are wanting to move. And in fact, Trulia and Company just did a survey, and they asked people, where do you see yourself living in just 5 years? And the number of people who wanted to live in a big city goes down. The number of people who want to live in the suburbs goes down. 7% more people want to live rural than do right now. So I thought it's interesting, and now is actually a great time from the technology perspective and from a number of other societal trends that show us that this is actually a great time to live in a small town. We have access to the whole world. You can live locally and be connected globally.
And do you think that people are doing that because there are more options? They don't feel so isolated or cut off?
I think so, because we have the ability to maintain those connections. You don't have to be alone, the only crazy person in your small town who sees things in a big way or sees the global perspective. People are more mobile than ever. People are more connected. The number of people who have international friends, even in small towns, has gone way up. It's because we have so much more connection available to us than we ever had before.
And I think that's really a great thing, because I think the more that we can learn what's going on outside our own peripheral, even if you're in a big city or a small town, the better business person you can be and the more opportunities you can realize.
Absolutely. It gives you a bigger perspective, a better understanding of what it takes to be human and what our similarities are, and it gives you an opportunity to learn those things that make your commerce work better. In order to be good at business, you have to learn to see the world from a customer's perspective, at least in a little way, so that you can go, what do these people want? And I can get it for them. And so if you actually have larger connections and a broader perspective, you get a chance to be a better business person, whether you're located in a small town, in a suburb, in the big city, in a neighborhood, wherever you are, you bring that perspective with you. It's your humanity.
So you travel around talking to a lot of, rural economic forums. Do people, are the folks in these rural towns, are they embracing the new opportunities, or are they stuck in that same thing saying, well, the opportunity is the only one that's in front of me?
There's some of each, of course. There's always some people who are like, that's not the way we used to do it. Back in the day, we've always done it this way. There's always that group of people. We call them the Committee of Negativity, because they are so negative about anything that may change. On the other hand, we are experiencing a huge generational change that goes along with the massive technology shift, this empowerment of people that you and I talked about even 5 years ago, and that other people talked about 5 years before that, and people will continue to talk about because it's such a major change. So much of the ability to do anything lies in the hands of the individual. Every one of you listening, you've got your smartphone right there. That's your connection to the whole world. You don't need the Committee of Negativity to say yes, because you can do things. And that's what we're seeing in small towns. Individual people seizing opportunities, gathering up with their friends, gathering a crowd, building connections to the resources they need, and just taking small steps on their own. Whether the Economic Development Forum or committee that has always been stuck in the past comes with them or not, or maybe they're the young people on those boards and they're making those changes. And we're seeing it actually happening in people of all ages. It's just the people that have that kind of positive outlook, who maybe kind of got, out-shouted by the negative voices in the past, are now so able they don't need anybody's permission to just make things happen.
There's that stereotype, Becky, in all those movies where the people who never, quote-unquote, escaped the small town, they never, quote-unquote, got out, or someone got out. Are you finding that young people in these rural communities, because of these opportunities, are having a tendency to stay or come back after they go for their education?
There really is a huge trend towards this. We see in survey after survey, University of Minnesota just did another one, that young people who live in small towns would love to stay connected to their community. They would love to stay. They just need to see a way that they can make a difference in their town, in a way they can make a living. More and more, that's entrepreneurship. It's make your own job as opposed to wait for someone to hire you. So instead of looking for a return to factories, young people are just looking for a way to make it on their own. And that has really influenced the number of people who either stay in their town or they go for their education and maybe move back, as well as the number of people who are in that 25 to 45 category that just make a decision that they want to move to a smaller community. And so because they want the quality of life for their family, so they make that move, maybe even to a town they've never even lived in before, but they're just looking for a town that has the quality of life where they'd love to raise their kids.
So how much do you think this trend of embracing local is really influencing this?
Oh my gosh, I think they're intertwined. I think that the embrace of local is key because in a small town you can be so much more of a part of your local. So, just a few miles away from me in Tacoma, Oklahoma, which if anything is just about the same size as Hopeton, so like 30 people, there's a dairy. They have 2 cows. Two cows, and they sell milk and ice cream and butter, and let me tell you what, you don't just know it, but like you can know the individual cow who produced your dairy product. So that kind of super connection is so possible in a small town. I don't think, even if you embrace local in Chicago, I don't think that you can reach out and go, that is the cow. That's my cow. She made my butter.
We say, which store did you get this from, Whole Foods or Trader Joe's? That's about as far down as we go.
That's your connection. And, you've got farmers markets and you've got more farm to table than has ever existed before. But I think in a small town, you can really embrace local in a way that is so personal that it makes a big difference.
It's right. We say, no, we didn't get it from Whole Foods or Trader Joe's. We got it from the cheesemonger at the farmer's market. That's even closer.
Yep, there you go.
So you also talk about, and you stress this a lot, that too many people want to have, as you say, all your ducks in a row before they start a business. How much do I have to be prepared or before I get started?
I think it's really smart not to wait until you have all those ducks in a row because, if you can just, figure out what your one duck is, this is the idea. So start finding ways to test that. You need not to try to leap in and, raise venture capital and make the whole thing happen all at once. Start really tiny. Can you do this idea over a card table at an event? Could you do something online? Can you sell to friends first? Can you get a trailer and test this idea out by traveling around? Now, these things are all super possible in small towns because we have lots of little tiny opportunities, and a market that's empty is so much more receptive to crazy little tests and ideas. Like the people that started the dairy, they just started with 1 cow. If they had started with, we better get 100 cows,
right,
which is small for a dairy, where there's dairies of 10,000 cows, then, a 2-cow dairy, you would think, that can't work. It's a tiny experiment, and it's so much easier to do that as a starting point and find out if there's demand and whether it'll work than it is to try to scale up and know for sure you've got it right at the beginning. So something that you can do that's tiny or temporary or together inside of another business, or something that you can travel for multiple towns, or can you do it online? Can you use technology to help you leverage up? But just start as small as possible.
So, Becky, as you travel around, what are still some of the challenges and the concerns? And I guess, is politics getting in the way? Because we've all seen that map kind of division between the rural and the urban cities. What are the concerns and challenges that people are still facing?
Well, that map and the political division is a really good point because I think the biggest hope for us to build connections and bonds across party lines happens locally. It happens with the people that you know personally. It's really easy to see somebody that is on TV, on radio, online,
on Twitter,
go, what an idiot. Right. It's a different thing to look at your neighbor and listen to what they're saying and go, let's talk about that and try to find a connection. Or to move away from politics and work on something local together. So the people that work on the arts festival don't have to all be on the same end of the political spectrum. They just all have to want to see art in the downtown for the weekend. So the hope for bridging our political differences exists at the very local level. And so I think that the work that we do at Savior.town is key because it's about building those local connections. I think that's the hope for the future.
And that's really worked with international economies, right? I believe the reason we have not had another world war is because of the trading that goes on between these countries, and it would be disastrous if there was another World War III.
I think that you've got a really good point that as we look at the interconnections that we have in our economies, even the number of businesses and individuals, as well as our entire economy, how intertwined things are now, I think it's harder to imagine doing that kind of thing. If you look at the nations that are the most trouble internationally right now, they're the most isolated. They're the ones that are trying to cut themselves off and don't have those kind of connections, and they're the ones that are most willing to risk and think about those things because they're not connected.
And we live in one of those countries now that's getting cut off. But one of the things that I really like about the whole local phenomena, especially where it intersects with politics, people in the last 2 years have gotten really riled up, but they've also tried to, a lot of the candidates, focus on some of the local economic issues, and I think that's good for everybody.
Oh, I agree, because the local economic issues are the ones that really influence how people feel about what's going on. But it's also, if you think about it, the local economic issues are the ones that not only touch us, but hold the future for our entire economy. We've built for the last a long time, 50 years or more, we've built our world around the idea of global economies intertwined. Whereas I think that the biggest promise for our future is in the local economy. If you go back to the question of how do you become a better business person, it's by understanding that the person you're doing business with is a human person. And that is not only so important for how we do business, that's the basis of our humanity. That local economy, the more we do business with each other, the better neighbors we become, the more we build local connections, we build community, we build social capital, we build all the things that create a positive future. So to see politicians turn around and recognize local economy issues gives me hope that we will be able to rebuild the best thing that we have in terms of having hope for the future, and that's our local economy, our local community.
And we also need more humanity. Becky, thanks so much for being on the show. Where can people learn more about the wonderful work you're doing?
You can find us at saveyour.town, and you can always find me at Twitter at Becky McRae.
Becky, thanks so much. We're going to take
Barry.
a break here. It's 8 a.m., 8:20 WCPT. We're going to talk more about small towns. Whenever I talk to a small business owner, I insist on one function they should always outsource, and that's payroll. You see, payroll is complicated, and both the employee and the government insist that you get it right. You see, when you do payroll, not only do you have to deduct money from the employee's paychecks to remit to the government, but as an employer, you need to add to it. Plus, you need to send this money to various government agencies on a regular basis, and if you don't do it, they will hold you personally liable for it. So this is one thing you got to stop worrying about. That's why I recommend the new Square Payroll app. With this app, you can do everything from setting up an account to paying your team. It's fully integrated with Square payments and time cards for W-2 employees and contractors. Square takes care of your tax withholdings, payments, and filings at no extra cost. There is flexible and transparent pricing that scales with your business. So go ahead, search Square Payroll in the Apple iTunes or Google Play app stores to download this app, or visit www.square.com/go/SBR to learn more.
Thinking of starting your own business? Get on board for a crazy ride. Be the first to tweet Barry at Barry Moltz and get a free copy of his book, You Need to Be a Little Crazy, The Truth About Starting and Growing Your Own Business.
Stick around to get your small business unstuck. More of Small Business Radio with Barry Moltz, now on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Well, welcome back. We're continuing our conversations about the economic benefits of small towns. Colby Williams founded Parengo Coffee, small business in Sikeston, Missouri, with his parents in 2013. Parengo was the Sikeston Chamber of Commerce Small Business of the Year that year. He's also won the Regional Entrepreneurship Award from the Missouri Innovation Corporation in 2016 and the coveted Golden Bean Award for coffee roasting in 2015. He's got his first book out. It's called Small Town, Big Money. Colby, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
So tell us, for those people, now I said before we started that I actually know another woman that grew up in Sikeston, Missouri. It's a very small town. Tell us about it first.
Well, yeah, it's a really small town, just under 17,000 people in southeast Missouri, and the closest towns around here are other small towns that are a little bit smaller or a little bit bigger, but none of them get very big. We've got one college town nearby where everybody goes to shop at all the stores you've heard of, and then every small town has a collection of small business owners who are trying to do their thing in all their industries, lots of restaurants. Sikeston is traditionally a farming community, and there are still some families who have owned land for generation after generation, and they still farm it. This is just about the northernmost point in the country where you can still grow cotton. So we have some cotton fields in the middle of our town, and then corn and soybeans and everything on the outskirts. And then Sikeston is famous for a large rodeo that we host every year, and Lambert's Cafe, which is home of the Throwed Rolls. The original one was founded here.
Wow, there's a lot to be famous for. So you started this business with your parents. A lot of towns have, coffee shops. But why go out and write this book, Small Town, Big Money?
Well, we were looking around, we wanted to start a coffee shop. We were starting to roast, and my parents always had the idea to have a cafe. They're in their late 70s now, and, mid-70s when we started. And they're still the type of folks who get around and they work every day and they hold hands and walk around the neighborhood at night. They're still really active and everybody loves hanging out with them. So they had the idea that their retirement plan would be to open up a little cafe and visit with people and have coffee and everything. That may or may not make a lot of money, the whole idea of just being there to visit with people. So they pulled me in because I was roasting coffee at the time, and I had a lot of experience working in shops. And, I'm entrepreneurial by nature, so I'm trying to figure out how can we make this work, give them the type of shop that they want, but still make it profitable, and how can we grow it in our region. And we looked around at other small towns, and what we figured out was that there's nothing around here doing what we wanted to do, and that was roasting, wholesale, and what they call third wave coffee, which is like paying attention to where the coffee comes from and treating it really well. You have these types of shops in cities all over the place in all the hip neighborhoods, but there was nothing in southeast Missouri like it. So we thought we could get out there and make it work by being the first in our area to do it.
So is the book meant to encourage people who are in small towns to start their own business because there's so much technology that's available and there aren't so many barriers to entry? Or are you looking to encourage people to leave the big cities and move to a small town to start their own company?
A little bit of both. In the process of doing this, I've met so many people in small towns. Just introducing Sikeston to you, I mentioned a lot of things we're famous for that were started by entrepreneurs who already lived here. But in the process of owning my own company here, I've had the opportunity to meet people from all over the place in the coffee world or in the restaurant world at large, but also other entrepreneurs in the region. And I've met people who had like an app they were building or some type of tech company. They were looking at which city they could go to get venture capital. And in the process, they decided to do it out of pocket, but to do it in a small town where the overhead is way less. They could get office space for almost nothing. Their rent was cheap. They could buy property really quickly and increase their personal net worth in that way, while at the same time launching this app where maybe their customers were all in China or India, or they would do a build out with somebody in San Francisco that they could hire over the internet. All of their marketing and all of their communications could be done without any regards to where they lived. And they thought that was the best strategy to get their thing off the ground. So the book kind of speaks to that. I think that you don't have to move to a city anymore just to go after that little piece of venture capital that everybody else is going after. You could start your company and scale really quickly from a small town, or you can move to a small town for that reason.
And I love this idea, and we talked about in the previous segment with Becky McCrae, there's so much technology that's available that you can have your business in a small town. You can work with people from all over the world as resources. You can have customers all over the world, and you don't have to be in an urban city anymore. And the economic lifestyle is a lot less expensive there than, let's say, if you live in San Francisco.
Yeah, and I think you're exactly right. And I've also met people along the way, and this is what I realized before I started writing the book, that people were saying, like, I can't wait to retire so I can move out to the country, or my family's got a cabin on the lake. I'd love to spend more time there, but I need to grow my business a little bit further. And in my small town, you can have those things right now with a really small income. I mean, on your startup wages, whatever you start paying yourself out of the gate, you can pretty quickly save enough to buy a home or get that little cabin or whatever. We've got property all over the place for sale here, and it's nice. I mean, in the book, I talk about how at the end of the day, I realized early on in Paringo Coffee's history that the day had just ended. I had just spent lots of times with my family and friends, making coffee, having a good time, visiting, hustling as hard as I could. And then when I went home, I got to build a fire in my backyard and look at the stars just from the other side of town. And I was able to get that with very little income on a startup budget, and I got it right away.
So one of the things you also talk about in the book is that small towns should really get creative in an effort to attract entrepreneurs. What should they be doing?
Oh man, this is really exciting. I love talking about this, and I wish I was the best person to talk to about this. But there are people out there who are in city leadership, from city managers to public works directors to Chamber of Commerce people in economic development, and they've got some great ideas. I think Fairfield, Iowa, has been leading the charge on this. They're about 10,000 people, but even as early as 1999, the New York Times wrote about them and called them Silicon Valley for their ability to attract entrepreneurs to a little tiny town in Iowa. People are doing all kinds of things right now. I've heard of cities who are blanketing their town. They're installing fiber optic internet and then blanketing their town with Wi-Fi. And then they put that on their brochures. You know, we're looking for industries and entrepreneurs to come to town. Free Wi-Fi. You know, it covers every nook and cranny in our town. Others are even offering property for as little as $1 if it will be used toward either an artist studio, an entrepreneur's office space, or something like that. So even old Victorian-style homes are being sold to entrepreneurs for almost nothing, and the city was working to rezone them into, you know, commercial and residential so that people can live there and start their business out of that home too.
So another thing, Colby, that you talk about in the book, which I thought was very interesting, is you say that people from out of town can use small town stereotypes to their advantage to grow their business. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think the first thing, I didn't grow up in Sikeston. I moved here to start this company with my family, but some of the things I thought of when I was thinking about moving to Sikeston and starting a business are the same things I think a lot of people think of, such as, I knew your dad real well, or you ain't from around here, are you? And these are things you hear around here, and it's kind of something that, you know, I dread when I go into social situations, having to talk about my family. No, I don't know that person. No, I didn't go to high school here. But these things can be used to our advantage. When you have like a good business in a small town, people are going to talk about it. And the fact that they're talking about you, some people shy away from that. They don't want to be gossiped about or whatever. But if you're being gossiped about for really good reasons, and you want people to be talking about your company, they're going to be talking about it. So if you give people great customer service, you have a great product, and you're an expert at what you do, that word is going to travel really quickly. And just like on Yelp or Google ratings or on Amazon, if you have a product on there, and if you're in a big city or if you're in a saturated marketplace, a bunch of really good ratings are not going to always float to the top. If you got thousands of other products or companies doing the same thing you do, it's hard to stick out. But in a small town, if everybody's saying something really good about you and there's nobody else doing it, everybody's going to hear that good message really fast.
So what you're really saying, Colby, is that any PR is good PR, right? If you're from out of town, at least you're something new to talk about rather than the same old gossip.
Yeah, and especially if you're doing a good job, they might talk about you because you're from out of town, or they need to go try that, or did you hear they're doing some weird pour-over coffee down there on the corner? But once they try it and it's good, that message is just going to spread even more quickly.
And so why did you move to Sikeston, Missouri, if you're not from there?
This is where my parents lived at the time, and they were really excited to get a shop started here. At the same time, there's a neighborhood here called Historic Downtown Sikeston, and that's where Paringo Coffee has been in business since the beginning. It was just starting to go through its efforts toward revitalization, and we're still right in the middle of it. But I saw that if this neighborhood was going to take off, and if I was the anchor of the neighborhood with a coffee shop, which is traditionally, you know, a social epicenter of a neighborhood like this, then that would affect my business in a positive way. So I decided to open the coffee shop there. Rent was very cheap. We started out with a $300 a month lease. And that was for the whole cafe and the roaster we started on. And, utilities are cheap here, too. We have our own power plant. Our Board of Municipal Utilities does a great job keeping costs low. They're some of the lowest in the state of Missouri. So all these things factored together, and I saw that I could save so much money by starting in Sikeston rather than in the largest town nearby, where rent is sometimes as much as 10 times what I was paying here. So we got going here, and in the process, I realized I needed to get involved in the neighborhood because of the All Ships Rise saying, if our whole neighborhood has more traffic, that's going to bring more people in front of my door. And if a percentage of everybody who walks in front of my door wants a cup of coffee, then the more the merrier. So I worked to get our neighborhood going. We started a magazine. We hosted events. Other people in the neighborhood got really excited and got involved. Other businesses opened up. People moved into apartments above the businesses. We're still growing, but it's been a really good change so far.
So what do you say to people that I don't really want to put a retail business in a small town like Sikeston because it does have a limited number of folks that actually can visit that retail business?
Sure. I think that a lot of retail businesses, and this is not for everybody, but a lot are moving to online sales. And for a lot of industries, it's something extra that we almost have to do at this point because the potential for scalability is almost limitless. You can do that from a small town just as well as you can from a big town. Now, even in the book, I say if you have an unlimited budget and you've got partners and you've got connections, if you can afford to put your retail space, you put your store or your restaurant, if you can do it on the busiest corner of the busiest two streets in the biggest city in the world, then you should do that because that's a pretty good recipe for success. However, if you're worried about costs or, like most of us, you're budgeting your startup budget, the quickest way to decrease your costs and to still be able to have the same outcomes is to look at a smaller space, a less expensive space, decrease your cost of living. And if you want to maintain your standard of living at the same time, you could do all of that in a small town. You could still reach the same customers around the world if you're selling online.
The name of the book by Colby Williams is called Small Town, Big Money. Colby, where can people get in touch with you in Sikeston? And I have to ask you this question. Is it pronounced Missouri or Missouri?
I say Missouri, but I grew up in Illinois, so who knows?
And how do your parents say it?
Well, my dad says Missouri. He's pretty old school.
So where can people reach you and get a copy of the book?
You can check out smalltownbook.com, and then Small Town Big Money is also available for pre-ordering on Amazon. The publication date is January 8th.
Colby, thanks so much for being on the show, and I want to thank everyone for joining this week's radio show. I want to thank our sponsors, Nextiva, the all-in-one communications platform. I also want to thank Square Payroll, the easy way to pay your team. Go to www.square.com/go/SBR. It's also provided by LinkedIn, the place to advertise to generate leads and build your relationships to your audience. If you want a free $100 credit, go to www.linkedin.com/SBR. And of course, I've got to thank our staff, our booking producer, Sarah Shaffrin, our in-studio producer, Lady B, our marketing manager, Courtney Gilchrist. If you are serious about being more successful in 2019, you got to give me a call. I set up a private line for that. It's 773-837-8250, or you can email me at barry@moltz.com. Isn't this the year that you get your small business unstuck? Isn't this the year that you finally, after all this time, make the money you deserve? Remember, love everyone, trust a few, and paddle your own canoe. Have a profitable and passionate week.
You can find Barry Moltz on the web at barrymoltz.com or more episodes of Small Business Radio at smallbizradioshow.com.
I don't mean to be so uptight, but my heart's been hurt a couple times by a couple guys that didn't treat me right. I ain't gonna lie.
Alexa, play Meant to Be.
Okay.
If it's meant to be, it'll be, it'll be. Baby, just let it be. If it's meant to be, it'll be.
With Amazon Music, a voice is all you need. Get access to over 50 million songs. Download the Amazon Music app today.
Pros in the know start with Lowe's, because at Lowe's, pros can get the latest power tools from trusted brands. Right now, you can buy the new Bosch Core 18-volt 2-tool combo kit for $229 and get one of 3 select cordless Bear tools free, worth up to $199. Plus, you can save time by ordering online and picking up in-store. Stop by the Pro Desk or visit Lowe'sForPros.com for details. So, Pro, now that you know, start with Lowe's. Offer valid through 1/30/2019 while supplies last. U.S. only.